How are you doing, everyone, and welcome to Stupid Things in Movies. Now that Endgame has had two theatrical runs and is available on digital and Blu-ray, I want to talk about some stuff that I really don't like in this movie, one scene in particular. Just a heads up, it should go without saying, but expect spoilers. So when it comes to Marvel movies, for the most part, I think they're entertaining, I think they're fun, but I mostly think they're cookie-cutter movies. I certainly don't think that they're bad, though there's definitely a few, looking at you guys, but I don't think they're great. Again, with some exceptions. For the most part, I think they fall right in the middle of this line right here. So when Infinity War came out, I expected it to join about 90% of the MCU in the it's fine territory, but was really impressed with how well it came out. I thought it was really written very well. It was a lot of fun. It had a lot of good action behind it, but it had a lot of emotional weight and depth to it. And our villain, Thanos, was wonderful. He was just tons of fun to watch. I really loved this movie. It was definitely one of my favorite of the Marvel movies. So when Endgame was releasing, I was cautiously optimistic, considering it was the same writer and it was written pretty much at the same time as Infinity War, as it was originally just going to be called Infinity War Part 2. I expected the same great story, the same great emotional weight, same great villain and character depth to be brought over into Endgame. And sadly, after seeing it, I didn't get that. And I'd put the movie right here. So again, it's not a terrible movie. It's not a great movie. I thought it was a lot of fun. It did what Endgame needed to do with the MCU. It accomplished its goal. It was enjoyable. But I think there's a lot of stupid in this movie. And today, I want to talk to you about one scene in particular that goes, in my opinion, beyond stupid and becomes just a really bad scene. And that's going to be this scene right here, the Vormir scene. So, what makes me dislike this scene so much? There's a lot. To start with, I dislike this scene so much just because of how much I liked the same scene essentially in Infinity War. In Infinity War, Thanos goes to Vormir. The audience doesn't really know what to expect in this scene. If you're a hardcore Marvel fan, maybe you do. That's not me. I don't know if in the comics the same thing happens. I don't know if there's the same planet, if the Soul Stone is on Vormir, if it requires what it requires. I don't really know. I didn't read the comics very much. I'm more, well versed than an average viewer of the movies, probably. But I'm not the biggest Marvel person, so there's plenty of information I just simply don't know. All my complaints, though, are centered around what's been told to us and shown to us in the movies. So anyway, when Thanos shows up to Vormir, the audience doesn't know what to expect, and we find out the rules of this place by not Hugo Weaving playing Red Skull. He lets us know that a sacrifice must be made in order to get the Soul Stone, and the key word is sacrifice.
The stone demands a sacrifice.
So Thanos has to willingly destroy, or for lack of a better word in this situation, kill something that he really loves in order to obtain his goal. This is a nice concept to us because it tells the viewer that the person who's trying to get this thing, this stone, has to fully understand the weight behind it and put up their own stakes. That's told to us again by not Hugo Weaving telling us a soul for a stone.
You must lose that which you love. A soul for a soul.
So the reason that this is so great in Infinity War is that it really helps to humanize Thanos, our villain. He became somewhat of an empathetic character in this scene, and it added a lot of weight to his character. I know personally this was the scene for me that made me really first realize that this person believes that he absolutely needs to do this thing that he's setting out to do. It helps the viewer to understand that he's not just a generic evil villain who wants to take over the universe and destroy it with a sky beam like we've seen in a million comic book movies before. He is willing to purposely destroy the only thing he really loves because it's the only way to save the universe from itself. It's a really great, impactful scene. It really serves its purpose well, and it just makes Thanos a very likable villain, and it creates a very emotional scene. We lose a character that we really like, a character who's arguably in one of the more popular Marvel movies and is a really, really well-received character, and Thanos comes closer to his goal. There's just a lot that's thrown into this scene on the back end of things. It's all behind the scenes stuff, and it's creating a lot of emotion for the viewer during the movie, and it serves its purpose, and it does it very, very well. So having said that, what's wrong with the same scene in Endgame? In Endgame, the scene completely ignores the rules that they themselves have set up, and it cheapens the entire purpose of the scene, in my opinion. Remember, the rules that are to be followed in order to get the stone is that a sacrifice must be made. I said that earlier to note sacrifice being the key word. And if you look up the word sacrifice in the dictionary, there's a ton of definitions for it, some based around religion, some not. But its most basic definition is to give up something important or valued for the sake of other considerations. So again, to give up, boiling it down, person X must give up possession Y. So it involves someone purposely doing something and getting rid of something that they care about. Essentially, in the scene that we get in the movie, it's the exact opposite of what our characters actually do. So firstly, the two characters who go in the scene are Black Widow and Hawkeye. Again, I'm not big into the comic side of things, so I was unsure of the relationship of these two characters throughout the MCU. But it felt the two of them going was an odd choice at this point in the films. When I first saw the first Avengers movie, I thought the two of them might have some kind of romantic interests with one another, just because of the way that movie was made and the way they interact with one another. But this just changed in the subsequent movies when I learned Hawkeye has his own family, who we do see at the start of this movie, to bear in mind, and that Black Widow seemingly had some kind of thing going on with Bruce Banner. That one they show us in a bunch of movies, in Age of Ultron and Thor Ragnarok, and even in this movie, there's talk and rumblings of these characters having relationships with one another or caring about one another. So I thought the character choice was odd, just because with Hawkeye's stakes for this film are set right in the beginning of the movie, in the introductory scene. His family is snapped out of existence, and he is dealing with that in good ways. Essentially, he becomes Ronin, and he's out murdering and being a vigilante and just killing anyone who he thinks isn't worthy enough to be alive because they're criminals, and that's not fair. His whole character arc in the movie is based around redeeming himself for the things he's doing with the loss of his family, but more importantly, trying to bring his family back. So what happens in the scene essentially is these two characters fight with one another over who's going to die. Not even who's going to be the sacrifice, over who's going to die. And that kind of ruins stakes here, because again, we already know Hawkeye's stakes in the movie are to bring back his family. And sure, doing this act will help bring that outcome around, but it's an unsatisfying conclusion for his character arc. So it's an odd choice for him to be in contention in this scene at all, because it kind of almost tells us like nothing's going to happen to him. It's just a weird choice when a sacrifice has to be made. The sacrifice isn't the thing that he cares the most about, and there's no rule in these scenes that say it has to be the thing you care the most about. But again, he cares about his family, he cares about his wife, he cares about his children, so it doesn't seem that crazy or outlandish that he would do whatever he would need to do, especially since he's already like just murdering people throughout the movie. It doesn't seem that crazy that he would just do what he needs to do in order to bring these people back because he cares about them. So we don't have an emotional weight to his side of this. It's very flat feeling for his character. And then again with Black Widow, her character seems to be more interested in Bruce Banner and the Hulk in the later movies. So it's kind of weird that these two are fighting with each other over who is going to kill themselves. So we end up essentially having a scene where both of these two characters are literally fighting one another, trying to jump off this cliff themselves. Hawkeye blasts Black Widow with an explosive arrow, which apparently doesn't really hurt her at all. It just knocks her out for whatever reason. I don't get that. Doesn't seem like he had different settings on those arrows when he's firing them at aliens and monsters, but it's okay. Black Widow's fine. It just knocks her to the side. Black Widow jumps and grabs him and tethers him to a cliff. It's just a lot of silly little things in what should be an emotional scene. The fighting with one another is not allowing the viewer to soak in the emotional circumstances of what's actually happening. It's a very quick roller coaster feeling scene of emotions that are going on, where essentially you're just trying to figure out which of these two secondary characters are going to die in this scene. It doesn't have an emotional impact or weight to it like it did in Infinity War. Remember, in Infinity War, we didn't know what to expect in this scene. We didn't know someone had to die. We didn't know who it would be. We didn't know Thanos would care. It was a very somber scene that was taken very seriously, and it was a slow burn. We're coming to these realizations slowly over the course of that entire scene, and we're being allowed the opportunity to soak in the repercussions of that. In this scene, it's just literally the two of them fighting each other every second, and we can't soak anything in. It's just a constant, oh, okay, he's going to be fine. No, she's going to be fine. No, he's going to be fine. We don't have any real period to reflect on what's happening in this scene because it's all happening so quickly. It honestly, to me, felt like this scene was more of a parody of the scene in Infinity War as opposed to an actual meaningful, impactful, emotional sequence in this movie. Now, getting past all of that even, the two characters here, and this is where the stupid really comes in this scene, in my opinion. The two characters here are literally doing the exact opposite of what they're told they have to do. They're required to make a sacrifice. They have to give up something important to them in order to possess the stone, but both of them are instead trying to give themselves up so that the other one will live. Well, that's not making a sacrifice. That's doing the opposite of what you're told to do. That's showing that they don't understand the significance of the stone itself and shouldn't be able to attain it. It makes me also feel like the writers didn't themselves understand what made that scene so impactful in Infinity War. What makes it worse is that we're not just told these rules in Infinity War, but we were given the same set of rules again in Endgame in this scene. We're reminded that the stone, quote unquote, demands a sacrifice. So it's pretty dumb that either of them would actually come out with the stone when both of them are literally doing the exact opposite of what they're supposed to do and refusing to make a sacrifice. Both of them trying to kill themselves is not making a sacrifice. They may be sacrificing themselves, but then at the same time, why would the stone give itself to the other one? In the scene, Black Widow ends up being the one who sacrifices herself, but the stone presents itself to Hawkeye. Well, why? He didn't make a sacrifice. He tried to sacrifice himself. They're both doing what they're not supposed to do. And it's really, really stupid. It shouldn't work, and it makes no sense. What makes this even stupider from a technical standpoint is they almost got around this stupidity of this scene. They gave themselves a way out, and they didn't take it. The two of them are fighting, and as I said before, Black Widow tethers Hawkeye to the side of a cliff, and he's holding on to her hand. So they're both kind of dangling over the cliff. Hawkeye literally can't fall off the cliff now. He's stuck to the side of it, and Black Widow is being held by him, and she's telling him to let her go. So if Hawkeye had let her go, now he's making a sacrifice. He has no other choice. He's making a sacrifice. And then the scene would work. And that would have been actually an interesting scene because it shows both these characters didn't understand what they have to do. What they were trying to do wouldn't have worked anyway, but they're forced to in the very end. Hawkeye is forced to actually make this sacrifice because there's no other option, and now he gets the stone, and he's left with the emotional weight and understanding of what he had to do to get it. So they almost had that. They almost had that way out. It was right there. It was ready to go. All he had to do was let go of her hand. But instead, they continue the stupid, and Black Widow does like a kickflip off of his hand and the cliff and falls to her death. So in the end of this scene, a sacrifice wasn't made. They both fought each other to try to kill themselves so that they could protect and save the other one. If you're trying to save a thing you love, you're not sacrificing a thing you love. It's stupid and it makes no sense, and it really gets under my skin. It may seem nitpicky, and that's fine. It is. Again, like I said before, the movie's fun and enjoyable, and I can get past a lot of stupid nitpicky stuff in it, because there is a lot in it in Endgame. But this one scene, it just pulls me out of the movie so much. For all the reasons I said above, the scene in Infinity War was wonderful. It was a great scene, and it served really well in the storytelling aspect of it. This was a scene that should have done the same thing in this movie. This scene in the whole time heist serves the purpose to remind the viewer there's emotional stakes to what's happening right now and to draw you into those characters. And it ends up not doing any of that. It just ruins all of it because they just are ignoring the rules that they established themselves just to have a little fun with a scene that should be emotional. And it just pulls me out of it. I think it's really silly, and I think it's really stupid, and I really hate this scene as a result of that. The scene also kind of ruins the ending of the movie for me too. Actually, if you don't take this scene into account, if you don't take the Vormir scene into account in Endgame, the scene of Thanos on Vormir in Infinity War and the scene of Tony snapping at the end of Endgame both serve the same function and show that both of these characters are two sides of the same coin. In Infinity War, Thanos believes so much in his plan to save the universe that he's ready to kill others, namely his child, to achieve that goal. He doesn't want to do it, but he's ready to do it. In Endgame, Tony is also doing the same thing. He's so ready to save the entire universe, but again, more importantly, his own child, that he's ready to kill himself for it. Clearly, he doesn't want to do that, but he's ready to do it. They both are willing to do the same thing for the same purpose, just the opposite side of it. One's ready to kill others for something, and one is ready to kill himself to do that thing. So this scene kind of pulls that element out of it, because now you're just thinking of the Vormir scene in Infinity War versus the Vormir scene in Endgame, as opposed to just really reflecting on the fact that the snapping scene in Endgame is more of that reflection of the Vormir scene in Infinity War. It shows these characters are linked by something. So what do you do about this scene? Because clearly the scene needs to be in the movie. You can't omit it, because once the viewer is told they're going to have to go get these stones back from where they existed in the past, you know what's involved in in acquiring the Soul Stone. If they just had Black Widow and Hawkeye show up with the stone, or it didn't require the sacrifice, it completely destroys the scene in Infinity War, and it's just a major cop-out. I mean, we already know what's involved in getting this stone. We've seen it. It was an emotional moment for us. It was an impactful moment for us, so we have to have something similar to that in this movie. They can't just skip it. So this scene clearly needs to be in it. We need to have a scene where a sacrifice takes place on Vormir. So what do we do about it? Well, my suggestion for it is, instead of Black Widow and Hawkeye, it should have been Black Widow and Bruce Banner or Professor Hulk or whatever he is in this movie. So here's why. Firstly, as I stated earlier, Hawkeye already has his own emotional stakes and character arc in this movie. His goal is to bring back his family. His sorrow for killing Black Widow is almost forgotten or shooed away into the corner by the fact that that after the Hulk snaps, he gets a phone call from his wife, and we can see that he's happy. The purpose of the sacrifice scene should be one that's stating that once your goal is achieved, everyone else may be better for it other than the one who actually did the sacrifice. Putting it simpler, our character shouldn't be made more happy by something a few minutes later compared to the sorrow that he or she feels for the sacrifice they had to make. So Hawkeye shouldn't have been in this scene, because that whole thing is ruined for him, or for his character arc, by the fact that he's going to be happier by the outcome of what he had to do. It's completely overshadowing the emotional stakes behind killing Black Widow, because he's getting something better in return. Something he cares about more is coming out in return. So why should this be the Hulk? Well, firstly, again, as I mentioned earlier, Banner or Hulk and Black Widow clearly have some kind of romantic relationship going on throughout the films. Even if it's only one-sided, it's made pretty clear to us throughout these movies that not only Bruce Banner, but his Hulk persona also have some kind of romantic relationship or feelings going on for Black Widow throughout the films. But it seems like both sides have some kind of romantic involvement with one each other, or feelings for each other. So it really should have been him who had to make the choice, because then again, at the end of the scene, when all is done, there's going to be emotional weight behind it. Our character now was required to make a choice he didn't want to make and kill this person. So when it comes down to it, he's not going to be happier for it. He had an emotional stake behind it. In addition to that, it removes the silliness of the scene and cuts out the actual choice and makes a requirement for the characters. The fall off that cliff wouldn't just kill the Hulk. We've already seen his character take falls like that, or worse even. Not even as the Hulk, but if you go back to Thor Ragnarok, Bruce, as just regular Bruce Banner, jumps off a ship and he face plants into a bridge and looks pretty dead. It's a pretty funny scene. I love that scene. It's really funny. But the fact of the matter is, we've established that this character in this cinematic universe, not even in his Hulk form, just as his regular human being form, can take a fall like this and survive it, really with no repercussions to it. He's just fine. He turns into the Hulk right after, and then fights that dog monster wolf thing. So knowing that falls like this wouldn't really harm Hulk or Banner, it means that Bruce is now forced to do something he doesn't want to do. We get an emotional requirement of the scene. He's now forced to do something he doesn't want to do. He's now forced to make the same choice that Thanos had to make, which is to sacrifice Black Widow. Unlike Gamora, she'd clearly be on board for it, seeing her behavior in the scene we got in Endgame. But now you have now you have the Hulk forced to do something he doesn't want to do for the greater good. There's no other option. If he was the one who jumped off the cliff, it wouldn't kill him, he'd be fine. So the only one who can really die in this scene is Black Widow. He's now forced to throw her off the cliff in order to get the stone for the greater good. And then when the culmination of all this happens, when Hulk does the snap with all the stones and this ends up working, and the snap brings everyone back, everyone's not better off for it. Everyone except for the Hulk is. So now you have those emotional stakes. He's now made a sacrifice in the scene. It preserves the intent of the scene that they wanted to do, which is essentially a movie studio doesn't want our heroes to literally fight one another over who's going to kill the other person or debate about who's going to kill the other person. It leaves out that option of choice and just makes it a requirement that Hulk has to kill Black Widow. So there it is, all wrapped up. That's why I really don't like this scene in this movie. I think it's a really stupid scene in the movie in what is otherwise a fun, enjoyable action comic book movie. Like I said before, I have fun watching Endgame. I think it's a fun, entertaining movie. I just don't think it's as well written. When it comes down to it, I think there's a lot of laziness in the writing of Endgame, which could have been avoided, especially when you consider how well they wrote Infinity War. But most of it is just what it is. It's mostly little nitpicky things. But this scene in particular, I think, goes beyond that. And I think it really ruins what could have been much, much better of a scene. And it takes away a lot of stakes of the scene and almost makes the actual sacrifice that we get almost comical and forgotten, because we just don't even really mention it anymore. It just doesn't have any weight behind it. It doesn't have that same weight that was presented to us in Infinity War in a very similar scene. So I really just don't like this scene. But that's going to be it for me today. I'm going to try to do some more of these videos on different topics or even on the same topics, same movies, different movies, whatever. If there's any movies in particular that you guys think have stupid things on it, be sure to tell me, and yeah, I will see you next time.